What's up, everybody? I hope you're all doing well today. It's Carpo. Quick video. It's so funny. I hear people say that all the time. This is going to be a quick video, and then you look down at the thing and it's like 15 minutes long. You know the good intentions are there. Somebody made a comment on one of my videos. It wasn't to me. It was just, well, I think in general, and somebody responded to it, and it was something along the lines of that when you start digging into knowledge, you get to a point where you're overly, I guess, inundated with information, and how it can become overwhelming. And I've heard this from a lot of people, that once you get into the rabbit hole, it's intense. Now, and that sometimes you're better off. People who don't know. I guess the idea is that once you're awakened, you can never go back to sleep. And people hear that and they're like, yeah, whatever. But it's true. I mean, once you've become aware of what's going on around you, and this is many different aspects to this. This is physical, mental, spiritual, societal, governmental, all the things that are going wrong with this world and the things that are right. Well, I thought of a good metaphor to explain how I feel about this subject, because I think it's an important one. There's a segment of the population who believes that knowledge is bad, that philosophy is considered evil, almost. Anything philosophy is considered tied to the occult and perhaps satanic, or just plain just waste of time for a lot of people. Even if they're not religious, they might think, oh, well, what's the point in thinking about stuff? You got to get to work. I have processed things in my mind to make me realize what's really important, and that it's not work. It's not to keep going. I see people all around me just go. I mean, like, even people at work that just can't take a moment to say, hey, have a cup of coffee and enjoy the moment. They're so worried about what's going to happen next and where they've got to be and what they've got to do. And I've been there, so I understand. Now, but the philosophy side of things, now when you get to the point where you have so much information that you just want to share it with everybody, I want to compare that to building a house, because I guess I could put it even a step further to say building a temple, because that's pretty much what this is about. When you hear about building your temple, this is exactly what they're speaking of. The idea that, well, let's take knowledge as, or gaining knowledge, gaining insight to life as building a home. Now, you can choose to just live in a tent all your life if that's what you want to do. You don't have to build the house. You can let all the materials just sit there. But if you want to do it, and you want to build it, you have to put the time and the effort into doing so. And at first it can become a very daunting task. You have all this stuff in front of you, and you have to order the right materials. Then you have to learn about these materials. You can't just go build a house out of the blue, right? You have to understand how all these materials work, and then you have to understand how they're placed. Now, when you start to gain this knowledge, it becomes easier. There's a point when you're overwhelmed. You've got to put up, you have the foundation up, but you've got framing going, the rain's coming, you've got to get this part on, that part on, and sometimes you just say, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. But you keep at it, you keep at it. Eventually, you have the roof sheeted, it's dried in, the roof's on, the walls are in, and you're starting to understand how the house goes together. And at this point, you've built your foundation strong, you've built your walls strong, it's totally weatherproof, and you can take your time on the inside to do the finish work. This is completely, this is exactly how I see it, is that you have the finished work to do, but you can pick at it, and you understand where all the studs are in the wall. It doesn't matter if the drywall is over the studs. You know exactly where everything is because you built it. And that you can take your time on the inside and make sure it's done right. But as things start to come together, you have less and less materials to worry about, less and less things to order, and everything just starts to make sense to you, and you finally get to a point where you feel like you might be able to finish. And once the temple's built, the home's built, you sit in it, and you enjoy it, and you know that you put the time into building it. the reason why I wanted to use that as a metaphor is because it does get easier. That comment about how things become overwhelming, and I know folks have told me, hey, you know, I start thinking and my head spins, and you know, there's way too much to think about, and it is daunting. It's I guess what happened was, for me, it was when I abandoned worrying about things I can't control, when things became easier. Now I'm on the downhill now. I've got the house pretty much built as far as being comfortable with the information I receive. In other words, there's no way that I'm saying that I have this, you know, this innate knowledge that I don't have to learn anymore. No, on the contrary, I've accepted the fact that I will never gain all the insight to life, because it's not in the cards for any human to have full-blown insight and understanding of everything around him. And even if he did, there would always be somebody else who saw it differently. So in that sense, we're each in our own little bubbles. And I've learned how to meld my bubbles with others to exchange information. This is what it's all about now. There's no holding back. You can get as much information as you want about any one subject, pretty much. And today it's easier than it ever was. You don't have to go down to the, you know, get an encyclopedia from the library or check out a book. The information's there. On one hand, that's great. On another hand, there's a lot of BS out there. So what I'm saying is that I've abandoned worrying about the Illuminati. I don't worry about New World Order. I don't worry about chemtrails or things that are out of my control, that if they do exist, it's something that I can't do anything about. So I think that that's the part that really gets people, is when they start learning about the other side of life. And there's a lot to it, you know, all the different sciences of understanding spirit and soul, and how the mind works, and free will, and the understanding behind all those things. When you have all those mechanics behind you, that's when you start to really understand the things that you learn. And that's what I'm really getting at here, is that you can know as much as you want about one subject, but you'll become obsessed about that subject, and it'll seem overwhelming. But if you step back from it, you realize that that subject by itself is nothing more than an idea. So you're giving the idea power by letting it fluster or overwhelm you. So when I got out of the whole conspiracy side of things, you know, it became a lot easier. I could dedicate more time to understanding self and world around me. And the reason why I think that's more important is because by understanding self and the world around me, and how people act the way they do and why they do, and understanding the mechanics behind all these things that I'm learning, I can use that information to my power. It means when I hear something else, I can gain from it. For example, if someone brings up something in a conversation that you're not familiar with, a term that relates to a job you've never done or something, you don't relate to it, and you don't pick as much up off of what they're saying because you don't understand the subject. But if you understand what that is and how that, say it's a material for a job, like a construction job or something, and then all of a sudden, when you hear somebody say something on the street, they might mention it, you'll understand more about that subject. Now, that's probably a poor example, but when somebody just mentions a particular subject, people only know what they know about that subject. And there's nobody who's really 100% expert on any one subject, which is why we exchange information, which is why we've been sharing with one another, and which is why I feel like I've finally reached this point in understanding that I don't have to worry about what's next, or, you know, what to learn next. Now it's just filling in the pieces to, because I've I guess cashed in and accepted where I am and who I am, and I've given up many of my desires, many of my worldly desires, most of my attempt at gaining a foothold in this society, and that's because I see no need for it, and I understand that it's a program. Statistically, they say 7% of the people cannot be programmed. And that's like, I don't know where they got that statistic, but 7% of the people are highly resistant to any type of programming, whether it be governmental, parental, or whatever. Very rebellious type people. I'm one of those 7%. I've always seen things through not through light differently than my friends and those around me. And that's, and not all of them, but some. The ones that stuck around are the ones that I could relate to. But the rest of the people who may be more susceptible, and especially the upper, say, 10% that are the most susceptible, they're likely to just let things go and not want to learn more about life and not want to know who they are. They're willing to spend their entire lives just accepting what they've been told and passing out of this life with not a single bit of integrity, more than when they were born. And, you know, it's not my place to tell people how they should live or what they should do or whether, you know, what's important for them. But if we avoid learning about subjects because it's overwhelming, let's say, or there's just too much to learn, then we never can build that house. We can never even start. You know, at least you can order the nails and get some boards delivered, you know, get it started. Because when people start bringing up big subjects and you don't have anything or any knowledge on the subject, then you're missing out on all that that you could have gained from it. Let me give you one example before this is, free will is one of those things I was talking about in the previous video. And there was a video I just watched, or a lecture I just listened to that was talking about free will. And it's a very long, many lectures, you know, I think it's like 12 hours. And this part really kind of got me. They'd hook people up to a machine to determine whether or not their brain would, whether their neurons would fire, you know, how soon before they decided to make a decision, say to move their hand or do something else. Long story short, what they found is that your decisions are made a split second before you even think about doing them. And they've replicated this in a bunch of different studies. If you want to take it to the extreme, you may have heard of the random number generators that they use, and they have them stationed around the world. And whenever a major event happens, they check these number generators to see if there are any anomalies. Before 9/11, there was a heavy change, and there was a heavy anomaly, but it started, I believe, 3 hours prior to the event. What it was a retroactive effect from people's emotion that they hadn't even realized they were going to have yet. The implications of this subject go so deep because, you know, this is how subjects come up where people say, oh, you know, well, time doesn't exist. The future is pushing itself into the past. Well, when we make a split-second decision, we're acting on a molecular level and, an atomic level. It's the uncertainty principle, that something an atom doesn't necessarily take any type of form until you observe it, or in the quantum world, you know. Quantum mechanics is just preposterous. People can't even explain it. People who spend their lives dedicated to it don't even understand how it works or what it is. Because quantum mechanics is just the mechanism behind which the quantum world works. And it's not yet understood, but we're doing the best we can. So, your decision is made before you even make the decision. What does that mean? Does that mean that we don't have free will? And the point I wanted to get to on that was that there are folks who say, yes, we have free will. And there are folks that say, no, we don't. But they're so sure of themselves and what they believe. But philosophers have debated this for centuries. Entire lifetimes have been dedicated to this subject. And so when people come today and say, well, yeah, I know what's true, it's preposterous. And this happens all the time. People come up and they're supposed experts on these subjects that have been debated for millennia. You know, subjects that people have spent their entire lives, you know, researching and dedicated to. You know, some weekend warrior on his computer thinks he's got all the answers. And that's... I respect the right of people to say what they like and to, you know, speak as much information as they want, but when they start putting up these big fancy websites saying that they have the truth and the answers and it's just a bunch of, you know, secondhand bull, it can't be proven or disproven. And these are the subjects people are into now. And this is why education on subjects are so important. because when you have a grasp on these things, you can look at something and go, you know, that's delusional, or else look at something and go, man, that's it. That's something I hadn't considered yet. The subject of UFOs, aliens, or that kind of stuff is just not interesting to me. And that's the other side of it. It's because I'm so far beyond wondering about interdimensional beings or demons or, you know, possessions or aliens or UFOs. It's just these things just either exist or they don't. There's obviously something going on with possessions. There's obviously something going on with UFOs. But there are people who come out and say, this is what's going on. And they write books about it. And they're so sure of themselves. And then they have to defend that point of view. And then when it's proven wrong, or someone has a dispute, they're considered brainwashed or programmed. Or, oh, well, the system's got you. You just don't understand. This happens all the time. Whenever, you know, sometimes I'll make a comment on a video or something about a particular subject that I once was into, but understood that it wasn't what it appeared to be and moved beyond it. And people won't even take the time to read the comment. They're just like, if you don't agree with me, you're wrong. And people are so sure of themselves on so many subjects that it's ludicrous. But that's why we do these things. That's why we learn these things. And that's why we get into philosophy. And that's why we get into understanding theology and theosophy and understanding every different type of belief system. This is why we never want to get stuck on one belief system that opposes any other, is because it keeps us from delving into those other ideas, to see the similarities. We want to be different so bad that we create these segments, these groups, you know, and we segregate ourselves from other groups because they don't have the same values or notions as we do. What the ancients knew was that this is something that needs to be embraced. The differences are something that needs to be embraced. Because each religion in this world was designed for the culture that uses it. You see? Obviously, Buddhism doesn't necessarily work too well in the fast-paced Western world, but people try it. And, you know, Christianity may not work in the mountains of Tibet. It's dedication to an idol. And it goes back and forth, and they can argue and say who's right, who's wrong. In the long run, it doesn't matter. It's which God works for which area. And the ancients knew that, and a lot of us know that now, that these were all, you know, ideas that were designed to help people understand these deeper meanings behind things. You know, religion, a lot of people say religion was designed to control people. And if you do the homework on it, you find that in a way that's true, but generally no. Religion was set up as a way to control the ideas that they wanted to pass to the people. But people in ancient times often weren't capable of preserving things in their pristine condition, such as knowledge. And so groups were given various keys, various, you know, it's kind of like the old, you know, Knights of the Templar, you know, and the whole Indiana Jones thing, you know, guy preserving the chalice. You know, the cup, the chalice, you know, I believe that the Holy Grail is completely symbolic and that there never was a cup. That's my belief. If you look into the tarot, we have the, you know, our spades were derived from originally the swords, and the cups represent our hearts in our cards, the cups of the tarot deck. And that cup represents many things, but it represents our connection and our love. And when you talk about the love of, say, Jesus, and you understand the cup, the Holy Grail, it's right there. It's not necessarily a bloodline, and it's not a cup that's hiding in a thing somewhere. It's an idea. And that's the whole idea, is this knowledge. Once you start to gain all these different ideas, you can piece it together and see through so much. So if I were to read the Bible 20 years ago, I wouldn't get it. I mean, I wouldn't be able to understand it. I would think, oh, this is just a bunch of jargon. But even back then, when I did look into it, I mean, I read Revelation when I was like 16. I wanted to know what it was about. And I was fascinated by the ideas, and I knew that there was something behind it. But I was so incapable of even coming close to understanding it. But now, when I read the Bible, I have a completely different understanding of it. And this is why we revisit books and revisit ideas over and over. It's because, damn, you gain a new understanding. You know, reading a simple book, you know, say The Little Prince or something, you know, like The Emperor Wears No Clothes. You know, you read some of these books when you're young, you don't quite understand it. You get a little older and you see all the archetypes and symbolism in there. So, to wrap and sum it up, I guess, is by gaining all these little ideas and all these little knowledges, you can start to throw things out that don't make sense and really gain things that help you. And it takes a lot for me to be, I know this sounds bad, how do I put it? It takes a lot for me to be impressed by knowledge. I very rarely see anything these days that not necessarily isn't, you know, moving, like, wow, that's amazing. I mean, I see something at least every day that's like, damn, that's something I hadn't considered. But I very rarely anymore see things that blow me out of the water, that are like, whoa. That happened about 3 days ago when I was reading the book I'm reading right now. I was blown away. Like, my whole reality system kind of shifted. You know, like my serotonin levels were just, you know, I could tell that I'd hit something that was like a revelation to me. And so when that does happen, you know, which used to happen a lot, because when I was younger and researching this stuff, it'd just be like, wow, oh my God, whoa, particles are really nothing but electrons and everything's invisible. And I remember walking down the sidewalk thinking, oh my God, this doesn't really exist. It's just a bunch of electrically charged energy, you know. And now I've gotten past all those little, like, crazy moments, you know, because the human mind is designed to get back to business, back to reality. You can't focus on something too long. Your mind wants to go back to living. So follow those paths and go back and forth. And it's an amazing world. It's an amazing life. And it really bums me out when I see people that aren't living it up to the potential. It doesn't mean doing a bunch of stuff. It just means learning about why you're here and trying to figure out things for the best, as best you can. And most of all, to accept the beliefs of those around you and not be condescending to those who don't understand. You know, sometimes I feel like people ask me questions that are so, it's almost like a kid coming up and going, looking at the sky and saying, what if there's something, what if somebody else lives out there? What if there's other creatures? Like somebody who's never heard of aliens. And you just roll your eyes and think, oh God, I can't go into this, you know. You've probably done that a million times with people. You're past that. You're in another realm. And there are folks who just don't even consider that. And I don't know how a person can just go from cradle to grave without a single contribution to the world or themselves. Because having a job and helping things and helping your family and helping, you know, financially, that's all great. That's part of life. But that's not life. Life is much more than anything our society provides for us. And it has to come from the heart. It has to come from within, and you have to really want it. So, go get it. Maybe we can all share these things together and eventually build a good picture that'll help us, help future generations, most of all. You know, it may be too late for many of us. You know, we've grown up in this world where we think things are a certain way, and you can only deprogram and unlearn things so much. You know, you still have ways that you've developed as a child that don't go away, no matter how hard you try. You know, you can't just become a monk overnight and forget about all your past things. You know, it takes a long time. And so hopefully we can train our children, or should I say, not train our children, so they're not stuck in the same situations that we are. So it's all about the future of our planet and of us as a species to prove that we can pull ourselves out of this rut by learning more about why we're in the situation we are. Because only through knowledge can we keep ourselves out of the pits and, you know, those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it, right? That's what they say. That's what we were told. Peace.